Continue with Bhutanese history and Zhabdrung Rinpoche's life story. I took a step back, right, because I'm so interested in Vajrayana Buddhism. I forget that a lot of people don't know Asia that well. And it's like, how would you know what had happened in the past if you're not Chinese? Because the Chinese people have like a very rich history tradition and they write down a lot of things, even though like maybe 30% is political, you still have the 70%, right? And so Bhutan, it means like the edge of the land of Tibet. So even in Tibetan terms, it's not really orthodox. So how would you know that Bhutan had legitimate events or their side of the story, right? So Jesuits visited. So we have a wonderful record, according to the historian who wrote the History of Bhutan, by Jesuits. Okay, and today there are elections going on in India, so it's very much he said, she said season. And you guys should just buckle up and enjoy the ride because sometimes it's hard to determine, with like history and all. So this is from Alchi. This is the founder of Drikunkaki. And I invoke his blessings before I begin reading, as well as six-armed Mahakal, protector deity of the Drikung Drukpa schools of Tibetan Buddhism, Himalayan Buddhism, and Ladakh. The Portuguese guests. It is certainly at the time of one of his regional tours in 1627 that Zhabdrung Rinpoche first met the Portuguese Jesuits Estevão Casella and João Cabral. I had to look this up, how to pronounce their name. Yeah. In a report Casella wrote on 4th October 1627 to his superiors in South India from Bhutan, he mentions meeting Zhabdrung, who was camping in a tent well decorated with silk. He was sitting in a high platform dressed in red silk trimmed with gold. To his right, and quite close to him in a corresponding position, there was an image of his father with a lamp in front, which was always kept burning. The Jesuits were the first known Westerners to visit the territory of Bhutan, and Casella's report the first eyewitness account of Zhabdrung's personality, activities, and control over the area. So in the previous live I did in March, I'll link it below, we discussed how Zhabdrung had to escape what we now know as Tibet / the plateau, the land of snows, to Bhutan because there was a conflict with the ruling family of Uthang, central Tibet, over who was the reincarnation of Pema Kardo. And now he is the king of Bhutan. The Portuguese description of Zhabdrung and the life around him are almost entirely corroborated by the Bhutanese accounts. He writes, "The king received us with great affability, showing that he was happy to meet us. He wanted to know where we came from which kingdom or nation, and asked us many other questions, as is usual on the first encounter. We told him that we were Portuguese, and as strangers never to come to these mountains, no one could remember ever having seen or heard that similar people had passed through that land, and therefore had never heard the word Farangues, which is the name the Portuguese are known by throughout the East. Farangi could also be, French. This king, known as Dharmaraja Zhabdrung, is 33 years old. He is both king and the highest lama of the kingdom of Kambirasi, Bhutan, the first kingdom of Botanta, Tibet, in these parts. It is very large and well populated. The king prides himself in his gentleness, for which he is very much esteemed rather than feared. The king is also famous for his abstinence, as he never eats rice, meat, or fish, sustaining himself only with milk and fruit. He is also renowned for the 3-year retreat he went on before we arrived here, having lived in a tiny hut he built above a rock on a high mountain without seeing or being seen by anyone. He got his food by sending down 2 ropes from his little hut linked to the 2 others below, which he then pulled up, never talking to anyone during that time. He told us he occupied himself praying and in his spare time carved some pieces. He showed us one, which was his best, an image of God in white sandalwood, small but exquisitely made. He is very proud of this piece of art, and he's also a very good painter. He showed us some of his paintings. This king is also well known as a man of letters and is revered as such by all the high lamas. Kings send him gifts, and he is very much sought out by people around this area, being host to lamas from faraway kingdoms. The reason for finding him living in a tent on this mountain is that the people from each village ask him to visit, and so he camps at some place where he is near to all of them. They give him many presents of horses, cattle, rice, cloth, and other goods, which are his principal revenue. And those people that do not invite him to their villages because they are very far away come themselves to him with their offerings. It was for this reason that he was in that mountain with his Lama school, which was always accompanying him. The school has more than 100 lamas who apply themselves to their studies and perform ceremonies. Today is also the anniversary of Zhabdrung Rinpoche's paranirvana when he passed on. And I learned this from our Guru Lama Sonam. The lamas do not carry weapons and shave their heads. Some, but not many, let their beards grow. The king has a long one which reaches to his waist, and he normally keeps it wrapped in silk, except during festivals when it is uncovered, as when we first met him. The hair on his head is nearly 1.5 meters long. It seems that he is very proud of it, and he wears it as a mark of greatness. However, he told us that he planned to cut it when he had a son who would be his successor, and that he would go into retirement and leave the world because he did not want death to come upon him while he had his hair long, as had happened to another king, his ancestor, who had caused a scandal for not having cut his hair before his death. The dress of the lamas is a short tunic which covers the chest, leaving the arms bare. The rest of their body, down to the feet, is well covered with a large cloth over which another cloth is worn as a cape. They never wear anything else, nor do they go about naked. I think because they were in India, South India, so they're talking about monks going around naked. Talking about the feasibility of missionary work the Portuguese had come to carry out, he continues. Because they're Jesuits, like missionaries. The freedom that exists in this fairly large and well-populated kingdom will greatly help us to achieve our ends, as the people willingly submit to the king without feeling any obligation to defer to him or follow his doctrine. Nor does he have the power to force anyone to do anything. Rather, his main revenues come from what people voluntarily give him. He does not wish anyone to be unhappy, and everyone is free to do what he wants, as the king himself told us many times when he speaks of his lamas, who are the group most dependent on him. The Bhutanese sources corroborate with the arrival of visitors from Portugal, the likes of whom had never been seen before. Isn't that wild? You just suddenly see somebody Portuguese. They are said to have traveled a long distance by land and sea through many countries, including the land of cannibals, and brought to Zhabdrung gifts of firearms, ammunition, telescopes, and other wondrous objects. Although there is no mention of their missionary work, Zhabdrung's biographer reports that the visitors offered to bring military support from their country if needed. I feel like they were trying to just, impress Zhabdrung Rinpoche, which Zhabdrung Rinpoche declined as it is against Buddhist principles to resort to barbaric forces. The biographer also adds that the technology of making bombs and ammunition can be found in the tantric texts, but the guns, which were unknown until then, could cause fear among the enemies with its mere sound. No doubt these gifts must have come handy in Shabdrung's direct confrontation with his enemies. Hasela's report makes no mention of the arms and ammunition or offer of military support. However, his description aptly captures not only the personality and religious devotion of Shabdrung, but also the prevailing religious and political situation in which Shabdrung was maneuvering. The southern land did not have a centralized political authority, and people were largely left to fend for themselves. Meanwhile, Shabdrung's religious stature in western Bhutan had certainly become unrivaled, and his political influence had grown rapidly. This growth was due to Shabdrung's spiritual authority and personal charisma, but it was also cultivated through his constant religious tours and services. The Jesuits found Shabdrung's peripatetic life quite cumbersome for their own work, but their presence in his company was very advantageous to Shabdrung. It was in order to gain political mileage and prestige that Shabdrung strongly encouraged the Jesuits to stay and even allowed them to use a room in Cheri as a chapel, granted land in Paro to build a church, and sent some of his own attendants to join the congregation. With no success in conversion, and despite much discouragement from Shabdrung against their departure, the Jesuits eventually left for Tibet. So that's the end of this Portuguese segment. And in the next section, there's a second invasion from Utsam, which we will get into on another day. Happy Guru Rinpoche Day. See you guys later.